Welcome to this recording where we're going to discuss the modes of transportation, which is part of our logistics learning module. And we'll see that there's a number of trade-offs and options that firms have when they want to decide how to ship something, or in which combination of modes they should use when they want to ship. So we'll look at 5 different modes of transportation, but we're just going to touch on pipeline. And we're just going to do that now, and we'll get into these other 4 in much more detail. So pipeline is the slowest and the cheapest, but the most appropriate mode of transportation when we have high volumes of goods that can flow through a pipeline. We use them for our water systems. We use them to bring oil from Alaska to here. Many nations use them to transport oil over long distances where the product can just flow. So there's good use of pipeline and a very economical and high quality and low cost use of pipeline. But for most businesses, it's not part of the decision process. It's either the right way or it's not involved. So we'll spend more time on these other 4 modes. Let's take a look at the value in the U.S. This is from 2007, and the percentages represent the change over 10 years from 97 to 2007. And I believe the government will redo this in 2017 to show another 10-year window. But this from the last study at the time of this recording, you can see that we have a certain amount of value, a certain amount of tons, and ton miles. So how many tons we move over what distance comes together to make ton miles. And you can see that in dollars, the dominance here of highway trucking in the U.S. Right, we have long distances, and trucking is very flexible. It can reach different markets quite easily. So we rely on highway mode very much in the U.S., and we also mix in these multimodal means, right, as a way of getting things the most economically we can from one place to the other. So, for example, here in Michigan, we have some iron ore coming out of the Upper Peninsula, and it might travel by a Great Lakes vessel down towards Pennsylvania, right down towards where it might become steel in PA or down near Chicago, Gary, Indiana. So we can see that multimodal works even domestically, right, with rail and water and truck and air. Let's look at in detail at highway transport. So sometimes I say trucking, sometimes I say highway, but you know what I'm referring to. So it dominates the U.S. Logistics infrastructure, and a lot of it is to do with the dispersion of our markets, right? We're spread over large areas, and because we can then reach with things like a parcel through UPS and the U.S. Postal Service and so forth. Something as small as a parcel can go door to door, or things that are larger can go door to door from business to business or business to consumer. So highway is something we very much rely on. We can all relate to it. We see the trucks on the road, and so it's a very important part of our structure. It continues to grow because of its flexible mode, right? So very few goods are moved in the U.S. without some point being touched by the trucking industry. Even when we go airport to airport, for an express delivery from UPS, it gets to the airport by truck and then gets to us, right, for that what we call the last mile by truck. So it's become much more cost effective over the years, and partly that's because of better scheduling and use of vehicle capacity. So we talked about asset utilization in the last module, and 2 modules ago we talked about capacity utilization. So those are related terms when we think of better scheduling and filling these trucks and not having them sit idle and not having them ship with very small amount of actually load in the back. Right? We want to fill them up if we're the asset owner. There's also more efficient and reliable vehicles. So quality continues to improve. Engine quality is much better than it was 20 years ago for these big diesel engines or for small gas engines for small vehicles, right? And we all know what's happened with the quality in automotive and the transportation industries. It's come up, 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 up. Vehicles are much more reliable. And we have, on top of that, increased competition. So highway transport used to be regulated, and it has not been for many years now. So we see bidding and natural market forces driving prices rather than centrally planned models, which brings better prices. Last, we see different types of shipments that we can make by truck, and you should understand just the basic two are full truckload and LTL, less than truckload. Okay, so direct shipments is not necessarily a full shipment. I shouldn't say full, but a direct shipment means it bumps the dock. We say we bumped the dock, right? That means the truck backed up to the dock. So, what time did they bump the dock is something we'd say, or how many times do you bump the dock in a day with that truck? So bumping the dock is one of the terms in the industry. So the truck bumps the dock at the sellers and is loaded fully or not, right, at the seller's option because they're going to pay the same price. It bumps the dock and then it leaves, usually on a contract basis, direct for the dock of the receiving firm, and most times either a customer or supplier, right? So that direct shipment, there's no stops in between. We don't go to another customer and attempt to fill the truck like we would with LTL. LTL is where it would bump the dock, let's say pick up one pallet or half the truckload full of goods, but then we would get a lower price from a common carrier to be able to take more time to get to its destination and go pick up more loads along the way and drop off more loads along the way, which can make things a little bit challenging. So sometimes you're unloading a truck in a lift truck and there's some confusion maybe about the sequence of unloading, and you have to remove somebody else's goods, set them aside, pull out your goods, and then put somebody else's good back on the truck. So that's actually pretty rare because the trucking companies are pretty good about the sequence, but it does happen. So that's a little bit about highway transport. Let's look now at water. So water transportation gives us this low cost when we can afford the time. It's slow, and we can afford some flexibility about when we're going to receive it because it's not entirely predictable. Big weather systems, congestions in the port, difficulty moving from mode to mode means we'll have a window, and the window isn't ours. It's sometimes more than a week. So if I'm bringing in goods, and I used to do this, I used to bring in goods from Asia and Europe into the United States for manufacturing, and the window from Europe was usually, we would think of anywhere at the shortest time on the water of 2 weeks. And from Asia, we would think in the shortest about 3 weeks on the water. But on top of that, you've got either truck or rail bringing it in from the port, right? So it has to get to the port in Europe by some means, rail or truck or a combination of the two, depending on the distance, right? And the timing and so forth. And it has to get across the water on the boat, and then it has to get from the next port inland, right, by rail and or truck or both. And so we use these multi-modes very often with water. Right? It's very rare that something only travels on water. If we pipeline goods into a ship and pipeline them off, we can still say that's multimodal, but we don't have trucks and rail involved in that case. So it has one of the lowest ton-mile rates of any mode, which helps to keep costs down. A lot of times pipeline can be less, but water is very affordable. And we're building larger ships. So with globalization and the move towards environmentalism and so forth, several things are happening to ships. They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That is driving better economies. So they call them triple-E class ships. Improved economies of scale, meaning they're larger, right? So more economies of scale, more containers per ship. More energy efficient would be the second E. So they burn less fuel, up to 20%, and I've heard even higher improvement in energy efficiency. And improved environmental impact. So the second two E's are maybe tied to each other to a large extent. When we're burning less fuel, our carbon footprint goes down, right? We have less emissions. But many of those ships are too large for the ports. In fact, the new Panama Canal is open now, and the largest ships can't go through it. They don't fit. Oops. I think in Guatemala or somewhere there's going to be another canal built down there that's going to be massive and able to handle much bigger than the biggest ships of today, anticipating future growth of even larger ships. In addition to that, many nations are working on expanding and developing more and bigger deep sea ports. And you can see some examples of those if you like. I'm not going to do it during the lecture, but I would encourage you while you're learning about logistics, if you'd like, I put a couple of very short YouTube videos in here where you can see about a minute and a half on the new Panama Canal. Take a look at it. If you've never been through it, I never have. It'll give you a chance to see it, understand how it works, and some of the things they've done to improve the use of water and so forth. And you can see a deep sea port. So London just expanded, or they just actually built a new London Gateway, which is an interface between large rail capacity and large, massive Tripoli level ship capacity. And you can see a ship bump the dock there and see how the large cranes start unloading it. It's a time lapse in fast motion. And then I think in that video you also see the interface with the rail yard. So trucks can leave, or the ocean containers, the 40-foot containers can leave those ports by either truck or rail. You've seen these containers on the back of the highway trucks here in the U.S., and you may or may not have known what they were. But when you see that big squared off box on the back of a truck or on the back of a train, sometimes double stacked, those are the ocean containers. And there are two sizes of ocean containers, 20-foot and 40-foot, but almost everything's done in 40-foot ocean containers, standardized worldwide, so everybody can use them. It's a nice standard container that's able to be reused for many, many years and interface with truck and rail around the world. So then we could talk a little bit, just briefly, about air. So it's ideal for customers who have a low weight, high value ratio. So just the inverse of what we said with ocean, right, with water. This is the other way. And an example that I've seen in my life has been very high-end electronics. So the logic chips that go into many devices. Now that we have the Internet of Things, right, everything's got a brain, the refrigerator to the automobile and everything in between. It's not just phones and computers anymore. So anyway, when these chips are transported, they're worth a lot of money. They're expensive. You could have a box that you could pick up that's worth $50,000, right? So you wouldn't throw that in an ocean container. You wouldn't probably even put it on a truck. You'd send it by courier, all right? So who cares if this costs $500? It's a $50,000 box. We're going to get it there in 2 days, and we'll spend the $500 doing so. So it's ideal and can be the primary mode for examples like that, diamonds, things that are dense and very valuable. It is also the least used mode because most things are not dense and valuable. So we usually don't plan our logistics systems around that in a production sense. It is expanding though because of all of our love of the kind of the Amazon effect, right? Of having small parcels delivered from home to from warehouses straight to homes. So air is expanding. It is also the fallback when we have a disruption in the supply chain. So if we're bringing in goods from a long distance in the United States or from overseas, and we have depleted our safety stocks, or there's been a big spike in demand, and regardless of the conditions behind it, if we need to meet that, or maybe a quality problem, right, that made some inventory unusable, then unfortunately we would have the meeting that no company likes to have where we say, it looks like we have to air freight those goods. It's very expensive. You can burn through hundreds of thousands of dollars so fast it'll make your head spin. And it takes the profitability out of long distance supply chains. If you have any recurrence of disruptions like that, can burn away all the profits you would have achieved by a lower cost supply for a year, can be more than burned in a day of running a few airplanes full of your goods over in a disruption sense. I did put in here that an example of an air gateway, the UPS Worldport in Lexington, Kentucky, is a marvelous facility. and really the heart of their global air hub system of hubs. So if you want to take a look, go to the PDF, click on the link, and you can take a look at how the planes come in, and then it'll go through a conveyor system, which we'll take a little bit more look at when we look at warehousing, but it'll go through a conveyor system of receiving, automated scanning, and travel through that system and come back out like shuffling a deck of cards, so that the goods that need to go to Europe go over to a big hub in Germany, and the goods that need to go to Asia go that way, and goods that are being distributed more locally go to those proper cities, right up to Detroit or over to Chicago and down to St. Louis, etc. So if you want to take a look at that, click on the link. It's another short video. I only picked the short ones for you guys, so I think it's about 2 or 3 minutes. Rail transport is a very important mode, not just in the U.S., but really around the world. Rail is used extensively. It has similar characteristics to water, but it is more flexible. So it's a bit more expensive than water. It's faster than water, and it's a bit more flexible than water because we can reach by rail at least every major city, right? We've got spur lines and lines that run off the main trunks to all major cities and sometimes small towns, right? Rural America, farming America relies on rail for inexpensive transportation of commodities around the country. So to accommodate growth, U.S. rail carriers have doubled the number of lines along the busy corridors. And there's some examples of that just south of us. Because Michigan has so much water around it, we're not really part of a major corridor. We're precluded by our Great Lakes. But just south of us in Ohio, there's massive investments in rail, expanding the number of lines, the ability to move goods off the rail, and to switch, which train this block of cars is on, so they can resort in these major multimodal centers and get things, from rail to another mode, usually highway, or from one train peeling off to another. Maybe at this point that container needs to go south, right? So it can break off into another one. So it's a exciting time for rail in the U.S. Warren Buffett's made some investments, and we can see that for the amount of trade we're doing globally and the amount of goods that are crossing state lines and crossing international lines, that rail plays a very important part. We do have to have time, is the thing to remember. Why would we ever send something rail rather than truck? Because of the cost benefits being very attractive. I'll give you one example. So a lot of automotive frames are built in the Midwest. Kentucky's got a lot of big plants. Ohio does. Michigan does. And to ship those down to Mexico, if a car is being built or a truck is being built in Mexico, would be very, very expensive for a trucking proposition. They're heavy, they're bulky, and you'd gain some time, but you would spend a lot of extra money if that was your primary mode. So what a company in Kentucky would do is go up to the big rail yard in Chicago with things loaded on a container that can be dropped right onto the train, and then X number of times per week, that train is going to leave and go down to Monterey or wherever in Mexico, get unloaded, and take its last trip over to the auto assembly plant down in Mexico. You lose a number of days to that. So you have to have a little more inventory in the system, right? We've got more inventory in transit, means we own more inventory, but you save so much money that it's absolutely worthwhile, and every auto company would choose that. I've never seen a variation from that. So rail has a role sometimes in still domestic shipments, a very important role that truck just would be prohibitively expensive. Strengths and weaknesses of the major transportation modes. So here we've got these 4 listed on the side: highway, water, rail, and air. And we could say, just to summarize for these, flexibility is the big thing for highway. It can go wherever you need to go, and it's not the fastest or the cheapest, right? Air is faster, but so expensive. And water and rail are cheaper, but not able to hit all the destinations. Water transportation, so it's highly cost effective for bulky items, and it's usually linked to a multimodal system, right? We can usually never get from port to port and be done. It's not the port shipping to another port. We've got to get to from an earlier point of departure and to a later point of destination using other modes. Limited locations and relatively poor reliability and speed. It's slow. Rail, highly cost effective for bulky items. Most effective, again, like water, when we link it to a multimodal system. Limited locations, but more than water. Not as fast as highway, but it's improving. The speed of the rail system gets better, and the flexibility of the rail system can also be extended, right, and improved. And there's a lot of investment in rail in the U.S. Air, it's fast, it's somewhat flexible, but needs to be linked to highway, right? We're not going to get these helicopters and airplanes pulling up to our back doors. It's usually the most expensive mode on a per pound basis. Only something very expensive and dense would think of air as its primary mode, right? And with the exception of that being this whole consumer movement to direct shipment to the home, which is driving a lot of increase overall in air traffic, expansions of those capabilities. So let's talk about multimodal a little bit specifically. It's a transportation solution that seeks to exploit the strengths of multiple transportation modes through physical, information, and monetary flows that are as seamless as possible. Seamless as possible being the key words there. So the holy grail for the multimodal solutions is to have visibility into where's my stuff. There's always a question mark when the goods are coming in long distance, especially when we've got ocean involved and ocean weather and so forth. When am I going to receive those goods? So we have to carry more safety stock. We can look at that when we talk about inventory. We'll see that when we've got variance in our lead times and variance in our consumption rates, or any combination of those two, that we have to build in more safety stock. So usually, multimodal, we have to think a lot more about safety stock because we don't have seamless visibility right now between modes. We have some estimates and question marks in our best estimates. A road railer is a specialized rail car the size of a standard truck trailer that can quickly switch from rail to ground without changing the wheels. So it's a matter of raising one and lowering a platform almost like a teeter-totter, so that it was rail capable and now it's highway capable. I did put into here another video. It's the expanded CSX rail yard in Ohio. It's a multimodal hub, major multimodal hub between rail and highway. And if you've never seen one, this is taken from a drone, gives you an aerial view of a major expanded CSX hub just south of us in Ohio, and you might enjoy it. So again, I put these in there. Every video that I've dropped in here is entirely optional, but I think in the logistics area, it's going to show you some things that we never see. We just don't see them. If we don't work in that industry, we don't go in a port. We might see one out the window of an airplane now and then. So just giving you a chance while you're thinking about the topic to try to take a look, and I encourage you to do so. The transportation does affect inventory management, and so just a quick comment on that there's implications there. Using the slower and cheaper transportation modes is going to cause inventory levels within the supply chain to rise. So simply think of the inverse relationship, that if we're going to go slow and cheap, we're going to have to carry inventory to do it. So we've got a trade-off, right? I'm buying these goods from halfway around the world. I will have to carry inventory, or I might suffer the cost of stockouts, which is another trade-off that I don't want to experience. Using faster and more expensive transportation modes allows us to lower the inventory levels. So just remember that trade-off. It's, nothing is universal, but you can pretty much take it to the bank that that's probably the case. When you go slow and cheap, you're going to carry inventory safety stock because of it. So in summary, we focused on 4 of the 5 primary modes of transportation. We saw the trade-offs between cost, speed, and reliability in those different modes. Multimodal transportation is used to capture optional cost, speed, and reliability depending on what we need to do and where the goods are coming from, where they're going to, how much time flexibility we have, and what we're willing to spend. Highway dominates the U.S. in terms of spending and tonnage, but multimodal is often supporting the highway system with rail, water, and air. Many deep water ports are under construction to accommodate this growth in global ocean shipping and to try to capture those triple E's, right? The environmental, economics of, economies of scale, and efficiency, the overall cost. So we got bigger and bigger ships and bigger ports coming online all the time. That concludes our discussion on the modes of transportation. I hope you enjoyed it. And we will go on in the next module and we'll look at how warehousing can basically help us earn a better profit and perform more flexibly and faster for our customers.